Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. We are here in Raleigh, North Carolina. My name is Mayank Agrawal. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Roundtable. We provide AI-powered data quality solutions for market research. But today I'm joined by Dan Wasserman. Dan, could you give us a quick intro?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. Dan Wasserman, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for KJT. We are a healthcare research and consulting firm. Been there for 15 years. It's been a wild ride and loved every minute of it.
And so what does KJT do?
So we help anyone really within the healthcare industry, but predominantly focused within pharma, medical device manufacturers. We work with some health insurers as well. Yeah. Over time, we've worked with some patient advocacy groups and just sort of a wide assortment, but predominantly on the pharma side. And we help them with new product development, evaluating products or services post-launch. In the market, we do a lot of so market research is predominantly our backbone, real-world evidence generation as well, and then we also have a medical and scientific communications team. So we sort of work across commercial and medical affairs for our clients.
So we're talking about kids before this. Every 5-year-old's dream is to be a market researcher. What's your story?
When I was in 5th grade, I wanted to be a professional soccer player. And that was definitely a dream because I did not have any physical attributes. I was a little bit fast, but that was all that I had, right? So then you kind of get back into the real world and you figure out, all right, so what's my life really going to be like? So I stumbled into market research, just like most people do. And so I went to the University of Rochester. And I was a political science major. And so my wife was at U of R. She was getting her PhD at the time. And that was like, all right, I got to figure out how to go get a job in Rochester. Like, what do I do? So I thought about sticking around for another year. And they had this great program at U of R, entrepreneurial program, where basically you try to get some sort of plan in place to go help out the community in some way. While you're doing this, you can take classes, right? So you can kind of further yourself. And I'm like, well, I don't really know what I want to do. So like, let me try this. And so I came up with this idea. I was really interested in polling at the time. So I thought, all right, maybe we could start a polling division at U of R, like build a little bit of notoriety. We could do some good things, like gather some information on interesting topics. And lo and behold, so I brought it to one of my professors, and she was very nice. She was listening to me for about 15 minutes, and then she stopped me. I'm like, okay, so what's your reation? And she said, Dan, this is really great, but there's no funding for any of this. Like, how academia
Classic
goes.
Academia.
Like with your background. And so she was very, very nice. And then she said, well, but thankfully, somebody basically came to her and pitched the same idea 3 weeks ago.
Amazing.
Why don't you take his card, go give him a call and see what happens? And so that happened to be the founder of KJT.
Wow.
So called him up, had an interview, showed me around our huge old office building that was built a century ago. Where they used to make caskets, right? So like really interesting history. And I was like, all right, let's do this. So I ended up learning qualitative, learning quantitative, and the rest is history.
Fantastic. So that's actually a really good transition. So you were doing math and computer science like we were talking about, and then came into poli-sci. Now you're a market researcher. You have this really strong technical background, but you're also in market research, right? And so the hot topic of the day is Gen AI. We're all
AI all day long,
everywhere, right? For the past couple years, we all seem excited about it. What is your take on Gen AI, and specifically in relationship to market research?
Yeah, so this is I like to think of sort of my approach to market research first. Like what do I think about, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I like to think about pragmatism first and foremost. And so one of the things that was really bothering me when ChatGPT came out was you go on LinkedIn, you talk with people, and they're like, oh, I just saw this list. It was the perfect prompts. It's like the 5 perfect prompts that are going to change your life.
It's the five workouts that will, get you to X goal.
It'll finally take off those 15 pounds.
Yeah.
No, that's not how this works. We all know better than this, right? And so I was just kind of like, honestly, like a little bit pissed and frustrated and feeling like this is not the right way to approach a tool like this.
Yep.
And so for me, like fundamentally, I see generative AI as something that we can build upon like any other tool. Yep. When it works for us, let's use it. When it works against us, like let's not use it, right? Yep. And so people talk a lot about can we do things more efficiently, right? Can we do things faster? Can we do things at lower cost? And those are certainly the case when it comes to AI, right? In general, and automation, you think about machine learning and things like that. But with generative AI, I think there's also a quality aspect, and we can get into this. But if there are ways that I can improve what I'm doing, like, let me go and do that, right? That's my prerogative as a business leader to be able to say, hey, I can do something better than I could 2 years ago. So let's go ahead and do it.
Amazing. So KJT uses Roundtable for data quality checks. Has this helped you do stuff better?
Yeah, absolutely. We wouldn't be talking today, right? Having that conversation. But yeah, it definitely has helped us. And I think one of the big things is, it creates a level of objectivity in chaos. I mean, in reality, like, the part of the problem with data quality in the industry is that it's really hard to measure. Like, there are very clear situations where somebody is clearly speeding through a survey, right? If you have a 20-minute survey and somebody is completing it in 2 minutes, there's just no way that they were paying attention. There's clear situations where you're asking them about a concept related to a new drug, and they give you a completely off-topic comment about a washing machine. Like, they're not paying attention. Like, those are really clear and really obvious. But those don't happen that much because people are pretty good at trying to, kind of game the system, or people are pretty good at, they're actually paying attention for most of the survey, and then they kind of got bored in the last part of it because people don't really like to take 35-minute surveys. And so it becomes really difficult to say, this is good quality data and this is bad quality data. And one of the things that's been really great for us has just been able to create essentially a standardization, a common language, and a way for us to go about figuring out, like, yes, this does feel like this is a problem, or no, this feels like something that, is probably fine, and there's just normal variation, right, in all survey responses. Yeah,
amazing. One of my favorite stories about, like, the Gen AI improving data quality was that Japanese example. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So this was really interesting. So we had some suspicion that we were working with some Japanese data that was questionable. And so nobody on our staff speaks Japanese, so it's hard for us to interpret looking at, say, open ends, right? But we have some other data quality checks that we can go and look at. But we saw some things in the data that didn't really add up, didn't make sense. And so we ran the open ends through Roundtable. And one of the things that came up was seeing some of the responses being categorized as off topic, or, it doesn't really make sense. And what we discovered was that in some of the verbatims, we actually saw respondents who were mixing different writing systems.
Interesting.
In Japanese. I didn't know this was a thing. So, this is what we discovered, where that isn't likely to happen when you have a native speaker who's just going to switch between different writing systems. And sorry for anybody out there who's more technical about this than I am, but that's my best explanation. And so that led us down the path of trying to figure out, okay, what about this seems problematic? Is it a sample provider? Is this some way in which we ask the question, right? Like, then that goes into other parts of the investigation. But that's definitely something that was like, all right, this is a red flag. There's something here that's not adding up. This doesn't make sense to us. So, all right, where do we go from there?
Amazing. Yeah, one of the things that we have seen from the technology development side is that your translation is like a hard problem. And, like, unless you're like hiring translators for every single language, it's like, how do you get good translation? One of the benefits of large language models that are trained on, like, text and, like, an infinite number of languages or whatever, they know the mapping between each and every one. And so when we're designing any type of algorithm, we're designing it in English, we're not fluent in Japanese, but then we can actively test it out in every single language. And we're actually just really impressed by the accuracy. And that's been, in terms of, like, how Gen AI can perform better than, say, like, what would the human effort take to actually do that? You would need, like, a translator.
We need human translators, and we work with some really great human translators. And so that's our standard for most of what we're doing. But when you look at something like open ends, like, think about it from the research perspective. So we are trying to get, let's say, 100 completes in a particular market, and we're trying to often find niche samples in the healthcare space. And so we might have a couple weeks to do that. Well, that means that I need to start checking those verbatims and sending them off for translation, like maybe not every day, but every other day. Cause like if I got a bad respondent or 2 bad respondents or 3 bad respondents, whatever it is, like I got to get it out because I don't want any quotas to fill up. Because if I start taking extra time, right, to go and check that, then I don't know if I have a problem with a sample provider. I don't know if I need more time in the field. There's all sorts of things. So it becomes a little bit of a logistical nightmare because I got to pull files frequently. I get basically like project minimum fees because like somebody has to go and read over like 3 verbatims in a day. And like, that's not convenient for anyone. So it's just not a great situation. And it's not how other companies are built to go and manage that. So for us, like to have a technology solution that can at least help us get closer to what reality looks like and to help us understand that and parse through it, that's fantastic. Now, if we need to go and get, a human expert, right, to help us figure some of this stuff out, like, then let's go do it too, right? But this is helping us for, a large volume of work over the year, which is great.
And so one of the parts of, or you're saying people justify Gen AI through like time savings and like operational efficiency. And so that's one thing that y'all are seeing, but that's not the only thing you all see. Yeah,
absolutely. I think when most people in the industry are coming at it, that's what they're thinking about. And for us, we want to see this as a quality improvement too. Yeah. And so when we're talking about data quality, I mean, absolutely, right? Yeah. First and foremost, I mean, you know better than anyone. So for us, like ultimately, if we have poor quality data, like our clients are going to get nothing meaningful and almost potentially negative result because we might be putting them down the wrong path. And so that's, I think, like fundamentally, we are integrity is one of our core values. Like data quality is huge, but think about other applications of AI. So things like conversational AI, and can we extract more information in a different kind of way with a respondent that gets to kind of like a deeper meaning? Yeah, that's incredible, right? Like that's something that I want to see as a tool for us. Yeah, and I want to talk about that as a positive, whereas most people are focused on hallucinations and there are all these problems, and those are there. Like there are a lot of challenges, right, working with generative AI, and again, you know better than I do. But let's also recognize the other really positive cases and make sure that we're thinking about those. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think?
I love that, like that negative, like it could actually negatively impact clients, right? So I don't know if you saw this. We did this willingness to pay study like a couple months ago, and we created a bad product idea. This is a solar powered refrigerated hat.
I love this idea, first of all, okay? Like who could conceive of such an idea like this? But like, let's go do research on it. Come on, let's do it. Yeah.
And so one thing we know about bots is that they have a positivity bias. And so they're going to tell you that they absolutely love your product. So we asked an LLM, we're like, hey, what's a bad product idea? The first thing it generated was a solar powered refrigerated hat. And we're like, okay, let's go.
Of course, why not?
Of course.
Let's do it.
We're like, yeah, this is definitely a bad product. And we asked like a high quality sample and a low quality sample how much they would be willing to pay. The high quality sample said they would pay roughly $35 for it. The low quality sample said they would pay $140 for it. So your client recommendation is just going to drastically differ based on, the quality of the sample that you're getting.
Right. So in the situation where you get that low quality sample and you're just running with it, right? Your client, if this is say like a proof of concept, they might say there's no market for this. Like this doesn't make sense. There's no way that this could ever fit. Yeah. Or vice versa, right? So you could be stifling innovation right there. Yeah. Fascinating.
And as a side note, we did then generate some images using DALL-E about the solar powered refrigerated hat. And we think it might be a good idea.
I mean, if this whole data quality thing like doesn't work out, or it starts just running automatically, you got a line extension right there.
A line extension.
Put like a Roundtable logo on there. Like, why not? I'll buy one of those. It's a good story, if nothing else. Like, good story, can I get that as a freebie?
That would actually be really good company swag.
There would be a story behind it. And you know what? They always talk about in marketing and sales, you got to be memorable. Yeah. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I come to a conference with a bunch of solar powered.
Yeah, people might think that you're a little bit crazy, but
it's memorable.
Right. All publicity is good publicity. All right. Well, that's something to think about. Maybe I don't know.
No, I love it. But so one of the things I don't envy about you is that you must be surrounded by AI pitches all the time. And
like from companies like Roundtable, right?
From
That's what you're
companies
trying
like
to say.
Roundtable, yeah. So like I'm an annoying salesman. You have to deal with 100 annoying salesmen. But like you have this really interesting technical background. You have this really nuanced understanding of AI. How do you evaluate buyers and vendors in like the AI market research space?
Yeah, it's hard. And there's a lot of folks kind of like yourself who have the technical knowledge, but you're kind of coming into the industry, right? And so it's more of like a tech startup company. And so you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we fit together in some way? And then you have other companies who are industry companies. They may have been around in the industry for a decade or 2 decades, and they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we bring AI into what we do? And so they might speak the industry language, but they don't necessarily have the sort of technical understanding of where they should really be applying AI or what I would expect as a buyer to be able to get out of it. There's a good example of a company they're well known. They do a lot of really great things in the industry, and they created a platform that allows you to basically analyze qualitative data. And I went through, I tried it out, and you put in some of your own data, and you're like, yeah, but this doesn't tell me anything that I don't already know, and I can't really trust that it's giving me anything that's that meaningful. And so, part of it for me is if I can buy something that doesn't have AI, like I'm going to buy that if it does the same thing. And in this situation, like I could probably have done something that didn't have AI that could have just used some natural language processing, right? But it's not using generative AI like large language models necessarily. And that I probably could have arrived at a very similar place. Now, whether that's still valuable, like that's another question. That's like paramount for me is figuring out like, does this have AI in it, first of all? Because a lot of people are pitching like, all right, it's got AI. And then you go through like the whole pitch, and then there's the last like 5 seconds where they're like, oh yeah, and we have a little chat bot in here, but it doesn't really do anything because it doesn't link to the rest of the data. And you're like, okay, great. So does it have AI? Does it actually use AI in a meaningful way that's different than if I didn't have that there? And then from there, it comes back to, can you show me an example of how this could actually make a difference in my organization, preferably with my own data, right? And that's a time suck.
Right.
So we don't often get to that point, but part of the challenge has been figuring out whether these platforms succeed or fail. A lot of them fail once you actually start to use it. And so that's the time suck. That's really hard. SMR's done a great job. They released their 20 questions that some companies have started to go and fill out. And so that's kind of nice because it gives a little bit of transparency. I struggle with the companies out there where they're not really sharing anything. They're just kind of like, hey, I'm going to build in a feature and, oh, it's got generative AI. And I'm like, but what does it do? I don't really understand this. And so that's to me where I need more information. Like, just tell me. Just hit me, make it simple for me, right?
Yeah. That's been one of our learning. So you're saying like in another life I would have been a teacher, right? And so much of my like part of like selling is teaching, and there needs to be transparency in the product. And like that's why we've invested so much time in our like technical documentation that's like open to everyone, and like all these like LinkedIn videos that we're creating. But it's just like we just have to show what this like means and what does like AI mean.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think to me that builds confidence and trust. I mean, obviously on some level, like you want to keep things proprietary. We made a really conscious decision last year when we needed our employees to get training on how to go use large language models. Like, we're not going to do anything, right? We put some good boundaries in place, some good guardrails in terms of how we were using or not using client data, right? And we've been very conservative with that. But like, there's a lot of things you can do without client data in a ChatGPT or a similar type of system. We made a really conscious decision that we were going to go make that training, but we were going to release that out to everybody else in the industry. Because everybody else could really benefit from something like that. And so that's led to a bunch of different opportunities for me to come and speak at conferences or other organizations. And it's been really fulfilling to me because they don't necessarily know a lot of these things. They're not thinking about it. And so sometimes if you just share it, right, going back to your teacher analogy, like it can make a really big difference. And it's fun when you see those lights come on in their head. But there's so much that we're all tasked with. Like, how do you keep up to speed with everything AI? And I kind of tell people like, all right, go ahead and learn. And I talk about how I go and I read, papers, and I try to go figure out what the new and latest stuff is. And most people can't do that.
Yeah.
So you really got to make it simple for them, and you really got to build up that trust that you know what you're talking about, and give them some examples to have them really understand it.
Yeah. And so you're seeing some benefits from your employees using large language models?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely been a process, right? Anything, whenever you bring in any sort of new technology, you think about change management, like you bring in a new HR software, you bring in a new project management software. Everything, right, takes time. And in some ways it's going to go fast, and then it's going to go slow, and then it's going to go fast, and then it's going to go slow. And hopefully one day, it all just sort of clicks in place, hopefully. But some of our employees have found some really impressive gains in their own productivity. I think that's awesome. I know I save at least 5 hours a week.
Amazing.
Just using ChatGPT or similar tools. We have our own internal version that's more secure. But I also think that, AI has helped really build confidence.
That's awesome.
For some folks. When you come out of let's say a qualitative study, you've got 30 interviews and your head is spinning. There's so many different ideas that you heard as a moderator, and you kind of know what the story is. Like, you were there, you were experiencing, you were taking notes along the way. This has been a couple weeks of interviewing, like you're kind of figuring it out as you go. It's really, I think, empowering in some ways when you can also go to a tool that can summarize those 30 interviews in 30 seconds or a couple minutes. And you're like, oh, all right, these were the highlights. These were the big points that I meant to hit. Oh, I didn't think about it in this way. I like the way that it's framing this. Or, no, it didn't quite hit this one right, but that's okay. I know better because I'm the human, right? So I think what it does is it helps to take out some of the grunt work. We were talking a little bit about that before. It helps to also, I think, empower, because it's another tool in our toolbox, right? That helps us do some things a little bit faster, do some things a little bit easier. And it can help us to investigate things that we don't have time to do necessarily. Like, we're all busy. We're trying. We have our day jobs, and they're not easy, right? This is all complex stuff that we're working on.
No, I love that. The grunt work and the confidence part is really relevant to me. So, in a former life, one of my many former lives, I was a programmer, and one of the most annoying things is like a file conversion. Like, I have to convert a CSV to a JSON, like really simple task, but I don't remember every syntactical thing about each of the languages. And then I would do some Googling and then, create this really janky script of how to, convert it. Or I just ask an LLM. And then it's all the different use cases, here are all the exceptions, and it's just built in. I'm I don't want to do the grunt work. And then now I have confidence that the file conversion is clear. And that's such a small example, but I hate doing file conversions.
But you know what? That's the thing. So when you think about it, you are now happier in your job.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing that.
Exactly.
Because instead of, it wasn't complicated.
Yeah.
You could do it.
I could do it.
But if that saves you, I don't know.
That's using my time.
30 minutes, an hour, depending on how complicated it is, that's great. That's a huge win. So for us, right, coming back to data quality as an example, if I can spend 2 fewer hours looking at open ends in my study, and I can use a technology that can help me to isolate and focus on the questionable ones and not even have to worry about the good ones, because there's a lot of great data that we get, right? That's 2 more hours that then I can spend working with a client. 2 more hours that I can go and conduct an analysis. I can work on visualizing that analysis. That's value add right there.
Yeah.
And that's what our researchers, that's what they sign up for. You don't really sign up, most people don't sign up at least, to go and read open ends and to try to figure out data quality. Is this guy, is this fraud? Is this low quality? And it's hard. So if I can get people back to what they actually wanted to do in their jobs and what their skills are best for, and that's how we add the most value for the client, best and highest purpose right there. That's a win-win-win.
I love that. Using Gen AI to empower your researchers, right? What is their highest leverage activity? And can you just make sure they do that rather than
that's what they focus on.
Spend time on grunt work and stuff like that.
I think I've thought a little bit about this. I've shared it in a couple of conferences. My vision of what the researcher looks like when you go 5-10 years out. I think in some ways when the conversation we were having as an industry last year and a little bit this year, but not as much. I think people have sort of gotten over it a little bit, which is are our jobs going away? And I think in some ways, what we're doing today might go away.
Mm-hmm.
Parts of it, not all of it. But the role of the market researcher is going to be far more strategic in 5 and 10 years.
Yeah.
Because we're not as focused on that grunt work.
Exactly.
We're not as focused on data cleaning. We're not as focused on putting together a report. We're focused on understanding the business context, asking great questions, using tools at our disposal to then be able to put that into action for our clients.
And that's the fun part about market research.
That's what we want to do. Like, that's what people sign up for, and that's what keeps people around, right?
I remember when I was like running studies all the time. Yeah, it's like 25% of my time spent data cleaning. And then like a month later, I realized I don't have enough samples. So now I have to rerun the whole experiment. And I'm like, this is my job. Like, this sucks.
Yeah, it's not great. Yeah. So like, if you put that in a situation where you have employees who are good employees, but like that's what they're feeling every day.
Yeah.
Like, that's not necessarily rewarding.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think, like, we're trying to build a model where people can feel good about what they're doing. They get excited to come into work because they're focusing more on the things that actually drive importance in the world. Like, you're making a difference that way.
Yeah.
So you're not making a difference in your CSV to JSON converter, right? Yeah. Like, all right, that's just monotonous. Okay, fine. Now you can make a difference by doing other things.
Exactly. I love that. So we've been both of us are very bullish on AI, Gen AI somewhat, but maybe the naysayers have something to their point. Do you, like, what can we learn from them?
Yeah, and I think, it's a nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
Right. So we did a survey. This was about a year ago. It was an industry survey. It was really informal, but it kind of helped categorize people where they sit.
Yeah.
And the naysayers, the people who are more kind of resistant in some ways to AI, it's like, oh, I hear AI. In some ways, like, that's natural human behavior.
Yep.
We were talking before about some research that's shown that if you go and you do innovation, you come up with a bunch of ideas, like your crazy hat, right?
Yeah.
Large language models can come up with lots of ideas. Humans can come up with lots of ideas. And if you go and you have humans go and rate those, they actually love what comes out of a large language model better. But when you tell them that it came out of AI, then they hate it, right? And it performs worse. And so in some ways, like, it's a natural reaction. And so to me, like, what comes out of that? What's the natural extension? Well, first, don't make anybody feel bad about how they feel.
Yep.
I think for us, what I like to do is kind of try to meet people where they're at and play into the fact that we're all researchers.
Yeah.
And as a researcher, the only way to know if something is good or bad is do the research, right? Like, look at the numbers, look at the studies. And so this is where I try to figure out, okay, what is the use case? What is the use case that could make sense? All right, so you're worried about hallucinations. Okay, so don't have your AI, whatever it is that you're doing, just automatically go and do a bunch of stuff without human oversight.
Right.
Fine. Okay, that's reasonable. But what are things that you do want to try to improve upon? Is an efficiency thing? Do you wish that you could do something different from an interviewing standpoint? Do you wish that you could analyze audio data differently? Figure out what that use case is and just explore it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Doesn't work. Yeah.
That's what we do as researchers all the time, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's what I feel like I've learned, is to be a little bit more humble and to try to be more empathetic to where they're coming from, where they're not necessarily seeing it as, AI is bad. They're looking at some of the attributes and struggling with it. And it's our job, I think, right? We're teachers.
Yeah.
Other folks are teachers, to help see the light and help see where it could make sense. And that's going to, I think, also help us, because there's going to be some perspective that they add that's going to help me understand, oh, you know what, I really like this. But actually, now that I've dug into it a little bit deeper, like now I have some more questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there are certainly challenges with generative AI, and it's important for us to understand what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah. So we originally met in the context of simulated surveys. And the tool was this general purpose tool where you could ask any question to any audience and have multiple choice questions, and we would simulate your response distribution and have associated confidence intervals, et cetera. But it didn't really solve a really specific use case, and it was very researchy and very experimental, et cetera. But I'm really glad we went through that process, because not all AI things, not all technology solutions are going to work, and you just have to see what works and see what doesn't. And so when we actually pivoted to data quality, it was okay, this is a really well-defined problem, right? One really well-defined process that people are doing is going through every single open end saying, is this gibberish? Is this off topic? Is this low effort, etc.? Exactly what large language models are really good at. And then we can add other types of data and, use machine learning, et cetera. But we actually went through that like learning process because our first AI product, no one really wanted.
And, it's funny because I saw the product when you showed it to me and I was like, I love the idea of this. I'm like, but I don't know what problem it solves.
Exactly.
And I was trying to figure it out. But yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, which is the first time that we ever do anything, we're probably not going to do it 100% right.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get lucky.
Yeah.
But you're not going to know unless you start trying.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's an old adage, but like the best learning is by doing.
Yeah.
So you guys went out, you started doing it, you got some feedback from the market on it, you figured it out.
Fail fast.
Right, fail fast. And so I think that's something that we all need to take and figure out how to work with that. Yeah. So if you are going to fail, figure out a way where you can fail in a controlled manner so that it's not going to hopefully break everything, right? So like if you had invested so much into that to the point where you couldn't come back and go and create another product, right? Like that would have been very different for you. But you did fail, you did fail fast and you were able to pivot, which is fantastic.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about communicating about AI like internally to employees or to vendors. How do you talk about this with your clients?
Yeah, that's been very interesting because some clients are getting their information from their legal departments, which are very conservative, right, and have one view on things. The security around something like GPT-4 is very different now than it was a year and a half ago.
Yep.
But a lot of legal departments haven't felt that way. And again, we're in a regulated industry, certainly understand that. They're getting some information from a variety of other industry sources. And sometimes it's good information. Sometimes it's maybe a little out of date or maybe incorrect. And so that's been interesting. So for us, we have been trying to start with essentially square one, and talk about what is generative AI? What is our approach to it? How do we see, AI fitting into market research and how do these two things meld together? And from there, that helps start the conversation. It helps make sure that we're on the right page and we have alignment because everybody's coming from a different place.
Yeah.
And then from there, then we can start to talk about, okay, here's some of the tools that we have in our disposal. And here are some of the ways in which we've been able to solve some problems for other clients in your situation.
You need that really concrete use case.
Right, exactly. As much as we can, right? But part of it too is some of the things that we're doing are really new and novel. And so there isn't necessarily that perfect use case or we have some ideas around it, but it's not 100% and really simple, but we're trying to figure it out with our client. We know it's a good tool. So it's been a little bit of that conversation that's evolved over time, but we're feeling a lot better about where we are now than say where we were a year ago in terms of figuring that out. But, as much as we can, we're trying to also just make that simple for our clients to understand a concept and understand where we're going with it, which can be tricky, right?
Yeah. So you might not like this, but I think a lot of people in the industry now look at you as an AI expert.
I'm sorry for them. Yeah. What have I done? Oh no.
But I think one of the things like Matt and I really appreciate is that you have this really realistic viewpoint of AI. You know the strengths, you know the challenges. You're not like, oh my God, let's just like drop everything and like do an AI. You're like, hey, let's test this out, identify the value proposition, identify the use case. To all the people that are like listening, what would you kind of recommend? How would they proceed when they're either A, developing AI or B, evaluating AI?
Well, thank you, first of all, for inflating my ego. Thank you. And you and Matt have been awesome to work with. And I see it honestly as when we're having a conversation like this or going out to conferences, like that's an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
There was a stat that I saw from a survey earlier this year that said something like 80% of AI professionals need to upskill to stay competitive.
Interesting.
So if you think about that in the context of like AI professionals, they need to learn a lot.
Right.
Like, where does that leave market researchers? Like, we got to learn a lot. So we're all figuring it out as we're going, even the AI professionals, right? For everybody, listening in, like to me, best learning is by doing. And so what are the ways to learn, right? Talk with other folks in the industry, go to conferences, go get on a sales call for something.
Yeah.
Like go find some technologies, right? There's some really great organizations out there that are trying to, kind of bring vendor days together. They're online vendor days, so they're virtual, so it's really easy for anybody to kind of come in and come out. Play with the tools. I like to think, one of my big things that I've been preaching about is the importance of prompt engineering on LinkedIn. And I think that in some ways, using a LLM chatbot is kind of like a gateway drug to everything else. Because what it ultimately does is it teaches you a lot about how these models work, how they perform well, how they perform poorly. And so now with that knowledge, when I go and I see a demo, I understand right away what it is they're trying to do. And I can figure out whether they've done a good job, whether they know what they're doing or not. And then there's also some interesting things, right, that I can bring back to what I'm doing. So it's play with something, play with ChatGPT or Claude, whatever is accessible and reasonable. Go take a Coursera course, right, on some of this stuff. But if you're just going to kind of sit around and not do anything, like it's like any other skill, you're not really going to acquire it.
Yeah, it's been weird for me because I essentially got a PhD in AI, but it wasn't like natural language processing or large language models. So large language models was new to me, and I'm learning something new every day, every week, every month, right? And just the pace of innovate, no one could have really. Very few people might have predicted this 5 years ago.
Not me. Yeah, definitely not me.
But not me. And so it's just been we're still learning, right, from the vendor side, and what can AI, what is capable. What is it capable of doing and what is it not? And the more familiarity you get with prompt engineering, like you said, you're well, this is possible for an LLM to solve, or this is actually impossible for an LLM to solve. And we need people doing this job. Anyways, thank you so much. Where can people find you or contact you?
Best place is always LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm most responsive there for sure. I'm trying to keep my email inbox under control, but find me on LinkedIn, Dan Wasserman. There aren't too many Dan Wassermans in the market research industry. Or you're welcome to email me, danw@kjtgroup.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks for having me on here, Mayank.
All right.